I'm very excited to be here today to talk more about logistics and manufacturing. Give me just a moment and I'll introduce our first panelist. So our first panelist is the Enterprise Account Executive for eShipping, a distribution chain management company headquartered in Kansas City, Missouri. Mike is a big fan of the beach and especially the San Onofre State Park and beach in Southern California. He is a dog dad to a sweet but occasionally psycho boxer named Ollie. And Mike helps companies better understand their opportunities for efficiency and cost savings in transportation logistics by leveraging sophisticated technology that is easily integrated into daily operations. Please join me in welcoming Mike Kettleson. Our next panelist is the Engineering Manager of Research and Development at Winger, a provider of innovative pet food and treat manufacturing equipment, specializing in extruders, dryers, and customizable technical services. Phil is a man after my own heart, and his favorite park is Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado. He has retired from his role as a dog dad after years with miniature dachshunds and is now embracing being a dad to grand dogs. Thank you. Phil specializes in finding innovative ways for companies to streamline their manufacturing practices and maximize efficiency. Join me in welcoming Phil Wiltz. All right, everyone. I am thrilled to be here to discuss opportunities to increase efficiency within manufacturing and transportation logistics. We hope you leave here today with a better understanding of how to identify sustainability improvements that can lead to cost savings and energy savings, plus how that story can impact your brand and create positive return on investment. So first, we'll talk about where energy and resources are being used in the supply chain and some simple ways to assess and improve operational efficiency. We'll cover some low-hanging fruit companies can use to get started, or things that people may commonly overlook. We'll discuss getting buy-in from the right people and moving from the basics to some more advanced, really positive wins. And then we'll have 2 Q&A sessions. So about halfway through, we'll pause for some questions, and then towards the end, we'll have some time for a few more. So be thinking about what you'd like to ask our panelists, and let's get started. So Phil, I'll kick things off with you. I'd like to ground ourselves in what are the most energy-intensive parts of the supply chain? What types of energy are you optimizing for within the pet food manufacturing systems? And what are some of the most intensive parts of that process?
Well, if there's a pet food dryer, that is definitely the biggest energy waster. In the dryer, you're heating air, and then you have a bunch of fans to blow it all over the place, and then you take some of that heated air and blow it out into the atmosphere. And so overall, that takes a lot of energy. Space heating in general, heating and air conditioning in your plant can take a lot. If there's other types of cooking equipment, those are normally pretty energy intensive. And exhaust systems, you're taking inside air and you're blowing it outside, which means you need to take outside air and blow it inside. And that typically needs to be either heated or cooled depending on the season of the year. So, and if you have very large motors, like an extruder motor is several hundred horsepower, that's a pretty big energy draw too. So that's the big ones.
Thank you. Mike, in the transportation side, where do you see the most intensive parts of resource usage?
Well, when you look at transportation holistically across the globe, it's over 20% of the world's carbon consumption. So number 1 or number 2 up there, right? And the majority of that is associated with ground transportation, cars, trucks, etc. Almost 75%. So when we talk about logistics specifically, that's about 10% of the overall footprint, 8 to 11 or 12, depending if you include the warehousing and distribution components as well. So significant opportunity for impact and opportunity to improve things there. You look at truckload in general, the U.S. by far and away is the number 1 truckload LTL. You look at ocean freight, it's moves probably around 75% of the world's container shipment volume, if you will, but much more cost effective and carbon effective by tonnage. So plenty of opportunity.
Yeah, lots of energy being used in manufacturing and transportation logistics. So, Mike, how can companies identify like the greatest areas of opportunity, and what is one low-hanging fruit that every company should try to achieve?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it comes down, and we kind of heard this morning in the keynote, is, what's going to drive the most business value, right? And when you look at the transportation market, there's some very complex supply chain distribution chains out there where we're having international freight, both ocean and air. We have domestic freight, LTL, truckload. We have small package parcel. So how do we wrap our arms around all of that, right? And that's typically one of the biggest challenges. And what we would see as low-hanging fruit is how do you turn the lights on, if you will, across the distribution chain and truly understand that and create that benchmark. Once you have that benchmark, creating strategies to reduce carbon footprint, to eliminate miles, to consolidate loads, to eliminate empty miles across the distribution chain, they're fairly, I wouldn't say easy, but at least you have the opportunity to execute on some of those plans and make incremental improvements across your distribution chain.
And we'll talk a little bit more about how companies can do that throughout the course of our panel. Phil, can you share more about where you see opportunities to better understand and optimize performance in the manufacturing process?
Yeah, some simple things. Well, I guess not necessarily simple, but equipment maintenance is a big deal. If the equipment is not well maintained, it's not going to operate efficiently. And again, going back to the dryers, there's so many things there that can waste energy. You need to make sure that all airflow panels and dampers are adjusted. Make sure the burners, if it's a gas dryer, are adjusted. The spreader, there's just so many things there that can be out of adjustment and that will significantly reduce the efficiency. Sometimes check back with manufacturers. They may offer upgrades, especially a lot of the upgrades are geared towards sustainability. And as far as our company, a lot of those anyway, we make them available as retrofits. Another thing to consider when you buy a piece of equipment, a lot of the components, such as fans and pumps and some of those, they are sized for the worst case situation, and then sometimes a little extra on top of that. For centrifugal fans and pumps, there's a cube relationship between speed and horsepower, which means if you start reducing your speed, horsepower is going to go down quite a bit faster than speed does. If you can slow a fan down to 80% speed, it's only going to use half as much energy as at full speed. Now, you can't just do that arbitrarily. You still need to have enough airflow appropriate for the process, and your manufacturer can help you with that. But if you can use variable frequency drives to slow some of those things down, they'll save quite a bit of energy.
That's great to hear. So during our prep meetings, we talked a little bit about resources that companies can use to better understand their current baseline and some of those opportunities that you were discussing, Phil. Would you like to share some of the free resources or existing resources and tools that your customers use to better understand energy intensity and some of those elements?
Yeah, the Department of Energy has a lot of free programs. They have one called ITAC, Industrial Training and Assessment Center. And if your company qualifies, they will come out and do an assessment of your plant for energy efficiency free of charge. They also have something that's called a Better Plants program, and they will assign you a technical account manager who will help you get started. They will help you with training. They will show you resources. They'll put you in touch with people, and they will really give you a good start if you want to start a sustainability initiative. They have all sorts of on their website have all sorts of software and calculators. You can calculate the carbon footprint of your existing plant. You can calculate reductions. There's probably a dozen different calculators there that they offer that are there to use free of charge. They also have an intensive training boot camp that lasts 3 days that is also free of charge. So the Department of Energy has a lot of resources. Another one you might consider is greenhouse gas. What's it called?
well, through the Department of Energy, they have greenhouse gas inventory trainings,
Yeah.
right? So you can
Yeah.
better understand how to assess your greenhouse gas contributors today. And as you learn more about that, you can take it into all these different arms of your organization, right? And so, Mike, on your side, how do companies go about gathering their own data and understanding their baseline?
In the logistics world, and many of you may have experienced it, typically the industry has kind of conditioned customers to provide them a bunch of data, right? So a bunch of invoices. Here's all my freight data over the last 30, 60 days, and the focus is always around cost, right? Well, typically that's a big piece of the business value, if you will, if you can save money by looking at different carriers, by optimization, et cetera. But I think that process very much is in line with what we're trying to do here, right? Let's set that benchmark, not looking only at cost, which is typically the primary focus, but there's process improvements, there's administrative improvements, and there's also ways to set that stage for a carbon reduction strategies, right? So whether you're looking to your current providers, whether you're looking to other folks in the industry, typically this is a free service that they will provide for you. Again, typically focused through the lens of cost. But there's obviously components that you can add to that from a sustainability to get that benchmark on the carbon footprint. And then industry-wide, SmartWay is something that the EPA came up with early 2000s. Free resources to help people measure, benchmark, manage, optimize their supply chains, right? So a lot of the formulas as far as, okay, how do I calculate my carbon footprint associated with ocean freight, with domestic freight, truckload load, LTL, et cetera. So some free resources out there. Then you just get into the conversation. Is it best to build this ourselves or buy, or just engage a partner that already is doing this? So
Yeah, it sounds a little complicated, if I'm being honest. But I think if you have the right partner, hopefully they can simplify it for you and support you through that process. I'd like to take this opportunity to open the floor for any questions that folks might have from the audience. Do we have any questions for our panelists so far? Great.
I beat Chris to it. Okay, I have two questions. So for you, Philip, I'm curious, manufacturing does have a pretty big influence on the total impact of a product after ingredients. I think manufacturing might be second. And I'm curious why companies don't talk more about the comparative impacts between, say, frozen fresh food that has to be refrigerated versus air drying versus kibble and extrusion. And why isn't there more information, and why aren't companies using that as opportunities to tell their story when they choose more low impact manufacturing?
I think part of that is because I don't know of any company that does all of that. We all kind of do our own thing, and so far we're still kind of in our own silos. So that's why I'm anxious for the Global Pet Expo tomorrow, because I can talk to a lot of different companies that do different things. But I'm not sure anybody has ever really done a comparison, just because we're all in our own little world.
Interesting. Okay. My other question is for you, Mike. So I never shop on Amazon, but when I do, there's an option that says, hey, choose the slow option and be climate friendly. And my question for you is, I don't really see that on other opportunities to shop. And I don't know if you do a lot of D2C or if it's mostly to stores. But I'm curious, does that really matter? And why don't more shipping companies offer a slower route option to give consumers the opportunity to make it more efficient for you to ship them product?
Yeah, I think there should be more options like that. Can't speak for Amazon, but in general, if you can consolidate additional shipments into one shipment, you're eliminating miles out of the equation, right? We see it all the time in truckload, where trucks are going out half full, half empty. We have suppliers that are on the inbound side are sending one LTL per day, and getting visibility of that kind of data to go back and work with your suppliers. Well, guys, can we have one truckload per week or two per week? How do we consolidate and eliminate miles out of the equation? That's a great example of giving that option to consumers.
I want to borrow David's crystal ball and ask you about the next 5 years, innovations and transportation. I see these big ocean freight things with sails. I read about electric trucks. But can you comment on just what the real stuff is going to be able we can use within the next 5 years?
I think within the next 5 years is probably very difficult. Just the time to get that to market, the cost prohibitiveness, the range on a lot of the electric, it's just not there, right? And I'm not an expert in that side of the equation, but I would say in everything I've read and research is probably decades. I mean, it's probably 5, 10, maybe longer. You may see some come into the market. We have requests every now and then for, electric and things like that. But by far and away, it still feels a very long ways out, unfortunately.
Could you please take the trade on the transportation instead of going to Mars?
I'm not sure I'd have much impact there, but I could try.
I'd like to ask a follow-up, Mike, on that side. We've talked a lot about some of the different things that companies can do. So while we're waiting for some of those longer-term opportunities, what are some of the things that companies can do today to optimize their practices?
Yeah, I think from an organizational standpoint, again, going back to the keynote this morning, building that stakeholder group, right, always includes executive level commitment. But when you look at the life cycle of a shipment, many times it touches so many different parts of the organization, right? You've got procurement, a PO for inbound suppliers, product coming in. You have operations who's unloading that, operations who in the shipping department that's routing shipments on the outbound side, customer service who's tracking shipments, sales who's wondering where my shipments are, right? Finance, administrative processing on auditing all those invoices. If there's a lot of things you can take off the plate there, but it touches so many different parts of the organization. That combined with obviously the business value, the benchmarking, the visibility to, okay, here's where we're at today, guys, right? Here's some opportunities that we see as low-hanging fruit to improvement. And then ongoing, just a managed strategy, what we would call managed transportation to, number one, define those outcomes. Here's the benchmark. Here's what we want to accomplish in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 90 days, what have you. And having the people component to help you guys manage through that process, to sit down quarterly, review our progress, and the supporting technology or platform and visibility to be associated with that and keep everybody in line.
Thank you. Phil, I'm curious on your side in the manufacturing process, like who needs to be involved? Who are the stakeholders there? And what does that look like for you?
Well, as far as the stakeholders, I think it's important for top management to be involved. If they don't buy in, the project will never take off. And then from there, it's almost throughout the organization, as an engineering group, we'll be making a lot of the decisions. The operations people sometimes get overlooked, but they're the ones that are going to have to implement this. And if you don't get if you don't get buy-in from the operations people, if they aren't cooperating, you're never going to be able to accomplish your goals.
Yeah, we got to work together, right, in order to get things across the finish line. So to that end, once we've established our baseline, right, we know how we're manufacturing today. We kind of have an understanding of our data. We've talked to the right people to try and optimize some of that. Phil, could you share more of like the best case scenario options? Like, what does that look like? What are some of the best case scenario things that people can do in their manufacturing?
Yeah, there's a lot of research going on in this area right now. One thing, there are some pretty simple heat recovery devices. There again, on your dryer, if you can put air-to-air heat exchangers or air-to-water heat exchangers, you can reduce your energy consumption by, as much as 20%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's for not a huge investment. And you could do the same thing for air compressors. If you have large air compressors, 90% of the energy that goes into those is given off as waste heat. And a lot of those are water-cooled or air-cooled. And a lot of times you recover that heat and use it for something productive. For a much larger investment, you can get more aggressive and go with heat pumps. And heat pumps, like a heat pump dryer, you can save up to 65% of the energy on a dryer if you use heat pumps. Another thing is the controls. They can take the human factor out. You know, digital controls can be programmed to run equipment very efficiently. And beyond just digital controls, now there are systems out there that use AI, and they will watch for a couple months and see how the equipment operates and what happens if you turn this knob. What does that do to the product if you turn this one? And once they learn that, then they can figure out the most efficient way to run your equipment. So there's a lot of really good technology that's coming on the market.
You've also talked about how important maintenance is. I didn't realize like how important it is to maintain some of this equipment and how that can impact efficiency. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
It's just a matter, well, maintaining equipment, for one thing, it's more efficient, but also you can eliminate downtime. And some companies do that very well. Some companies not so good, especially now. A lot of people in the pet food plants say they have trouble hiring help. It's not a real glamorous job, and so it is harder to get that maintenance done. But there are, when we talk about digital controls and AI, there are also systems that will remind you about preventative maintenance, so that you don't forget. And sometimes that's easier, and so it's just good practice in many ways.
Thank you so much, Phil. So at this point, I actually have a special surprise for everyone. We're going to call up a special last-minute panelist. I would like to welcome to the stage the former CEO of Nature's Logic and our PSC Chair Emeritus, David Jaskulka. Thank you, Dave. Thank you for joining us, David. David is here to talk a little bit more about best practices and what a really successful logistics and transportation strategy can look like. He and Mike partnered together while David was at Nature's Logic to create the first carbon neutral distribution chain in the pet industry. So we're really excited to have you both here to talk a little bit more about this. David, can you give me a quick intro into how you started to work with eShipping and who facilitated that relationship?
Thank you, Erin. And first, I just want to say thank you, everyone here, for joining together on this journey. It's just been such a pleasure to be with every one of you. So thank you. So when I was CEO of Nature's Logic, and the job as a smaller brand is to more than double the size of the company in a couple of years. The last thing I wanted to do is change distribution and warehousing. It was not the problem I wanted to address. But our VP of Operations, Marilyn Sherwin, who some of you may know, she was VP Operations for Hills, and then a couple of us called her successively out of retirement multiple times for different brands. And we were honored to have her at Nature's Logic. Over the course of a few weeks, she was saying, we're having warehousing problems and distribution problems. And at one point, she did a search and recommended eShipping and went through the list of why we should go there. And again, I didn't want to change, but then we had to. And Marilyn showed that it would cost us less. And I was like, why? Are we going to sacrifice quality? Will there be less safety in the warehouse? Will there be, are we going to have more accidents, more spoilage, any of those things? Said, no, it's really mostly about shortening shipping lanes and just being more efficient in our shipping. I'm like, ooh, there's an opportunity there. Mia Davis talked about the white space and said, as a small brand at Nature's Logic, we were interested in measuring our Scope 3, but it felt like too daunting a task. The measurement felt like it would cost us more than actual impact, and I wanted to be focused on impact. And it just seemed like an opportunity. It's like eShipping is going to provide us with all the data we need to just do a few calculations to understand our Scope 3 emissions in this particular area of our business. It's not the whole business, but it's an important area. And again, when Mia talked about white space, we looked and saw, okay, no one accomplished that before, so there'd be a lot of PR benefit as well as the impact. So it was just really a pleasure to partner I called Mike's CEO, Chad Earwood, and said, let's put a program together. And, Mike was there every step of the way, and it was just, it was very exciting to do.
Thank you, David. Mike, on this side, what do you see a lot of companies that come to you with cost savings in mind? And can you talk a little bit more about those parallels between cost savings and sustainability and energy savings?
Yeah, it's really a table stakes, right? Getting that visibility, which typically is through the lens of cost, right? And then having a supportive platform that spans all modes, and it's kind of out of the box, right? Once it's going through a platform of sorts, whether that's ours or someone else's, you have that visibility to it. So then you have the opportunity to impact, right? And that's where this conversation really started. The business impact was there, and again, kind of out of the box. The next thing you know, we're going into the process to offset a portion of that, calculating the footprint inside of our warehouses, which are all multi-tenant. So you take up a certain portion of the space, but it was amazing journey that as David mentioned, started with Chad, our CEO, and then going through and becoming that first carbon neutral distribution chain in the pet industry.
And David,
And by the way, we called Pet Sustainability Coalition to figure out how to do the offsets right. That's how we did it.
That's the part I forgot. Thank you actually for pushing us in this direction. It's been a great journey.
Yeah. And I think an important piece of this is that there were a lot of elements that you both considered before you went to offsets. So would you mind sharing more about, you talked a little about warehousing, comparing some of the different loads and things like that. What were the key elements that you were evaluating as you went through that process?
Yeah, on the transportation side, again, kind of out of the box from a platform perspective, SmartWay, going back to the publicly available, they rate carriers. So there's SmartWay for shippers, there's SmartWay for carriers, and there's SmartWay for logistics providers, right? And those carriers have to submit a lot of data. So we actually have in the platform where, okay, these are 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10. So you can actually look at various LTL carriers, for example, and pick the most efficient ones. And a lot of that's based off age of fleet, all right? Their operations, their terminals, how are they running those? How old are they? The energy consumption, their forklifts inside of their operations, things like that you may or may not think about as you look across the distribution chain, but that helps you to identify more efficient carriers. And then just calculating the space in the warehouse, right? And most of the buildings, what are they LEED certified? Are they newer buildings, et cetera? Just things like that where some basic stuff, but it really does provide a big impact when you look into a project like this. Yeah.
So David, when did you decide that carbon neutral distribution chain was in reach? Was it in the evaluation process as you were looking at eShipping as a partner, or was there some tipping point through the process when you had the data that you decided that was an opportunity for you all?
Great question. I would say that we first saw that there was going to be a story around improvement. Just by going to eShipping, we became much more efficient. I'll admit, it's not why we went there. I never told this to our investors. I was just like, we're saving money. That's why we're going. And then explain how. And then the authentic sustainability story came on top of it. So first it was improvement, but then when it looked like it was a sufficient improvement, we looked into the cost of offsets to be able to tell the carbon neutral story. And that's where we went after discussing with PSC.
And we know there have been some changes to carbon neutral, and this is strictly distribution chain. I just want to make sure we clarify that.
So it's back a few years.
Yeah, it was. And it's just really exciting to see kind of the success trajectory over time. So I have one more question for our panelists, and then we'll open it up for another round of Q&A for the audience. It's really clear that there is this parallel between cost savings, efficiency, and potential energy savings as well. So how does someone go from just getting started to seeing the return on investment? Phil, would you mind taking this first?
Yeah, one issue when you're looking at energy consumption in North America, it's really hard to get a good return on investment because fossil fuel is so cheap. We're an international company, so we work with people all over the world, and there are parts of the world where you can get a really good return on investment, but it's hard here. And so you need to be doing it just because it's the right thing to do.
Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, I think in our space, it's tough as well, with electric trucks and sails on boats and different fuels, right? A ways out still. But the low hanging fruit again is turning the lights on, right, initially, and then just optimizing from there. Route optimization or load consolidation, fill the truck up. There's some very low hanging fruit that we see, and just by doing that, a lot of that's platform driven. But don't forget the people component as well. You've got to have somebody to sit down with your stakeholder group or your committee, what have you, to sit down quarterly and review what are the objectives and, hey, what does the next quarter look like and how do we keep improving? That's really where we see these be successful.
Yeah, I think it's easy sometimes, like you think the work is setting up the equipment or getting to the baseline, right? And really what we've talked about a lot in our preparation is like you have to take that next step. So don't be afraid, to bring people back together and continue to reevaluate as you implement what are these ongoing opportunities. David, anything else that you would like to add?
Well, just the thought, if you're a small brand, I think there's so much value in trying to be first. Figure out something someone hasn't done. Make sure there's authentic sustainability impact, and then tell that story to your consumers and your stakeholders. If you're a larger brand, you can go somewhere where you could be a leader. And you don't have to be first, but you could be a leader. So, look for those authentic stories that you could tell. And maybe that's just as a marketer,
Right.
That's where I think. But
No, I think that's
I
great.
think that's where the ROI comes from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not just in what you do behind the scenes, right? You have to carry this forward. And I think a lot of customers, and what we're seeing in the data and the research, right, is that consumers care about the values that you have as a brand. And if you're not communicating those actions to them, then you're not actually expressing your values to them. So that's a really authentic way to conduct your business. Thank you all. Let's open it up for another round of Q&A. Anybody have any questions?
Yes, this is a question for Mike. Mike, when you're thinking about the best outcomes that you've helped create with a new client, what is the most important question when you think about that this crowd has not asked you yet?
Please.
That's a great one. And maybe it's not just this crowd, but most of I spend most of my time in the pet and the animal health industry, but across all industries, this doesn't come up, right? There's so many technology platform out there that can help people benchmark this part of the equation. The focus is solely on cost 90% of the time, right? And
This means sustainability.
Exactly.
Sustainability is
Yeah, exactly. And it's so much, once that's great, you're focused on cost, but you can also easily bring along the benchmarking of the carbon footprint and lay that baseline for future improvement, but no one asks. It's half the time it's us bringing that to people we're talking to.
Great point.
Mike, well, first of all, thank you so much for your presentation. Mike, you mentioned the first net zero distribution chain. What does it mean exactly, and how did you achieve that?
Yeah, it's carbon neutral, right? So after we went through a lot of the I call them, I guess, baseline opportunities, eliminating miles, consolidating loads, everything, all the low-hanging fruit we could do from that standpoint. As David mentioned earlier, from there, we calculated the remaining footprint and then invested in offsets years ago to impact. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
So, Phil, you had mentioned the low cost of fossil fuels in this country, and I was wondering about what role there may be for renewables, especially some place like out in Kansas where you do have a lot of wind energy production. or putting solar panels on pet food production roofs or something like that, or what role is there for renewables in?
I think there's a pretty good role. I know in northeastern Kansas where I live, our major electrical producer is called Evergy, and if you look on their website, approximately half of their electricity is generated with clean energy. So I think there is a lot of that going on. I would expect that to slow down somewhat over the next few years. And there are parts of the world where it is very important, where you can get a good return. When there's carbon taxes or when there's cap and trade and some of that, that really does encourage the development of alternative energies.
No one else has one? I'm happy to give this away. Okay. Phil, this is a question for you. Based on how you describe the dryers, they really sound like a hot spot. I have never been around a dryer. Could you just paint a picture of like what this machine looks like and why it's so energy intensive?
Well, the dryer is a big box, typically around 10 feet wide by 14 feet tall by, it could be up to 30 or 40 feet long. It has conveyors in there that are typically screened or perforated, and the pet food drops on the conveyors and hot air blows through it and dries it. And so it's just the fact, the big energy waster is because once that air is saturated, we can't use it to dry anymore, so then it goes out the exhaust. And this isn't just pet food, this is industrial dryers in general. There was a consortium in Europe, went for 5 years, called Dryficiency, and the whole purpose of that was to find more efficient ways of designing and operating industrial dryers. And that's where some of the high temperature heat pumps and some of that comes from. There really has been an effort to make them more energy efficient.
It's great to hear that we're organizing around some of these key opportunities, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
we've talked a little bit about other groups that have come together throughout this weekend or this week, and really try to find those opportunities to come around, create solutions. And I mean, internally, I think we have to do that as well. I'd be curious to hear, like, show of hands from the audience, how many of you are in charge of your operations regarding transportation or manufacturing in this room? So very few of you, right? So I think, again, it's like facilitating those relationships is a really key part of solving some of this and really finding efficiency. So I'll go ahead and wrap things up here. I'll ask the panelists to share one key takeaway that you have from the panel today. Phil, do you want to start us off?
Okay. I'd say the main thing is to keep up on new technology. It's more and more is being developed and prices are coming down, and it's only going to be in your benefit. I already talked about the heat pumps and the AI. There's things like, machine vision, just so many things that are new on the market. Hydrogen instead of natural gas for burners. All of these things are in development and have huge potential. So just kind of keep up to date with what's going on, and at some point it'll be worthwhile to jump to the new technology.
Thank you. Mike?
May not be the best for this room, but no, you guys would probably want me to turn the lights off, right? I mean, find a partner to help you turn the lights on, create that benchmark, and good things can happen from there.
Thank you. David, anything else to add?
I'd say importantly, align any sustainability programs with your brand. So Nature's Logic, we had Offset. So we had a clean food, clean energy program. That was our main branding program. So we did clean energy related offsets. Now after watching Cheryl's talk, there are great opportunities in nature-focused investments, but align with the brand.
Well, thank you all so much. And thank you to our panelists for being here today.